Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise. And we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer, dear listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. You're the host of this show, Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. Like I repeatedly inform you, we do our best to bring life-changing, impactful, and powerful content each and every time. And this time around, I really have a powerful guest for you. He's been here before. He's been, this is his third appearance on the Nuggets. And his name is Oabona Kgengwenyane. He's going to share with us on how to 10x your output as an entrepreneur, 10xing your entrepreneurial output. Welcome to the studios.
Thank you, Remo. It's great to be back on the Nuggets.
Would you do me the kindness of explaining your background and sharing with the viewer? Some of them may not have seen you in the previous Nuggets.
Okay. Yes, my name is Oabona Kgengwenyane. I'm an entrepreneur, and I run 3 organizations. Inolite Consulting, which we've been doing for about 20 years, doing management consulting. We also have Digital High Technologies, which focuses on ICT, high-end ICT and telco. And also the last one is the one that's closer to the earth, which is the farming business. So we do cattle breeding, focusing on Simmental and Charolais type breeds. So those are my preoccupations.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you describe your entrepreneurial journey? Can you give us a condensed version of the entrepreneurial journey in terms of how it started and where you are now?
No, absolutely. I think before I do that, let me first define what entrepreneur is so that the viewer can be clear in terms of the context of what we are talking about. So the word entrepreneur in French means starting something new, starting a venture. So here we're talking about people who are prepared to take risk, start something new. Typically entrepreneurs, they do these ventures looking at themselves. It's almost a positive, selfish thing. But in the end, whatever venture it is, it benefits society in general. So what you find globally is that nations that have more high number of entrepreneurs, they advance and the standards of living are very high. So that is why I believe that for our country, the more entrepreneurs we develop, the more entrepreneurs that come up. Particularly here today, we are talking not just ordinary entrepreneurs, we're talking about 10 times entrepreneurs. I've been to forums where we've been talking 100x, 100 times entrepreneurs. So this is what we will be focusing on with this discussion for Botswana. And we'll also talk more about, in Botswana, we have a very bureaucratic setup, which has been which really the background is based on the history of colonization, where we adopt a lot of stuff from the Brits. So I'll be talking about how we need to a top entrepreneur needs to break out from this bureaucracy. Now, in terms of my background,
it's almost like we have to decolonize our entrepreneurial thinking.
Absolutely. So in terms of my history, I started I was sponsored by Botswana, and I worked for Botswana. But when I reflect, I see that based off my grounding, which is largely a lot of Botswana, we were grounded on bureaucratic systems. As I said, we inherited them from the Brits. If you look at our education system, the teaching is premised on history. Today when I talk about 10x, you'll see I'll be talking about futuristic thinking, which it was not part of our curricula, whether at Lesedi Primary School.
Just carry on with your entrepreneurial background.
Background, yes. So what I mean is that my background and a lot of Botswana's background is premised on how we're educated. I always say we are a bit cloned in terms of how we were infused with our education, which was premised on the British system. And that has made us to almost do things in a similar way. When we went to school, we were taught to become almost public servants, the most dominant courses at UB were political science, administration. So you can see those are very bureaucratic type of things. Now, when I went into corporate, I now was exposed to the rigidity of a corporate environment. I worked for a top mining company in terms of Botswana,
yeah.
and I saw myself struggling with the bureaucracy. The rigidity of the administrative. When you have to make a decision, it takes a couple of hierarchy for you to be able to make. So I almost to the extent that I decided to leave the corporate to find my entrepreneurial journey. So I left Botswana to find my career in entrepreneurship, and I joined a consulting firm, engineering consulting firm at the time, which I worked for that company where I was a director and principal and shareholder for a while with other partners. But we grew very fast. We made it very well, and we were one of the, as you could recall, Joe Flux was one of the
huge.
He was huge. He was
Mr.
one of the, absolutely. He was one of the really superior citizen-owned examples. But I'll talk about it more later on. We reached what we call a ceiling of complexity. When I talk about stages of entrepreneurial development, where now the success that we achieved introduced new complexities, which we struggled to deal with. So it ended up where we had to now go in our different ways as the principals and the original founders of Joe Flux. Yes. So that's when
you, Mr. Chiepe,
and Mr. Mpake, Mr. Mogobe, Mr. Marobela, Chili Marobela, if you recall. So we and Mr. Raborokwe, I forgot Mr. Raborokwe.
Yes.
So we went in our different ways, and that's when I decided to go on my own. And that's when
there was also Mr. Ratzi at some point.
That was even before me. Yes, he was there. Yes. Mr. Ratzi, you recall. You know the history very well.
I know it. It's one of the companies I admire.
Absolutely.
Obviously, you guys are role models.
Yes. So that was again a lesson in my entrepreneurial career, where we reached a certain level where now I went and started InnoLead Consulting as we know it today, where I went on my own around 2005. We got new employees, and I started as a founder of InnoLead. At the time, it was called Expert Group, Botswana. So again, exciting journey. And talking about 10x, we actually from 2005 to 2015, we grew 10 times in terms of our revenue. Wow. Exciting, we grew. And then, interestingly, when we go to 2015, we reached again a ceiling of complexity. We
like
again
a
plateau where now sometimes it's are growing pains. Where at the time now we're reaching where we were, getting overworked, getting stretched, a bit of a crisis. And something really happened to me at the time, because I was referred by one colleague from Canada who referred me to a program in Canada called Strategic Coach, which is a coaching program for successful entrepreneurs. So I enrolled in this program in 2015, which
you did online.
No. Every quarter I used to go to Toronto for this program, which actually shocked even my colleagues in Toronto. So this is a program comprising of successful entrepreneurs in North America and some across the world. I was the only one from Africa. We had some from Europe, some as far as Japan coming to this program. That really almost revolutionized my outlook to life as an entrepreneur. One of the most refreshing in terms of introduction of concepts of it. And these are the concepts that I will share with the viewers and yourself today in terms of the reaching a ceiling of complexity and how to grow to become a 10x, even to a 100x type entrepreneur. So those are the concepts that I'll be sharing with you
Which
today.
takes us to the next point. For you to emancipate yourself from those British systems, there's a certain mindset you have to adopt. How do we emancipate ourselves from that bureaucracy, and how do we move forward to actually have, if you like, a blueprint that we can use?
Yeah. Ramagobe, you would agree that we live in a different world. And what has happened is that entrepreneurs now are becoming the role models to the world. They're becoming role models. There is a whole revolution around entrepreneurs, and the whole bureaucratic history of admiring top corporate leaders is actually almost collapsed. And now entrepreneurs are the real thing. Now, in terms of this revolution,
now celebrities, haven't they?
Yes.
In some ways.
Now combining this revolution of entrepreneurs with technology, in terms of internet, in terms of social media, it's really creating an environment where there are immense opportunities for growth. Now, there are three different responses to this growth. One is that the successful entrepreneurs, they thrive in that. They thrive in opportunities. They approach these with a lot of positivity and opportunities so I'll be talking about these 10X entrepreneurs, the top entrepreneurs. We have some in Botswana, we'll talk about those. And then there are what I call emerging entrepreneurs. I'm sure you've talked to some colleagues either in corporate or in government who you can see they are a senior manager at government, but they have ambitions to shoot out and explore the whole. So I'll be talking to those in terms of a roadmap of how they can carve out that journey of becoming top entrepreneurs. And then there are the bureaucrats, the top bureaucrats. Now, the bureaucrats are those that they resist this change. They are premised in the past. Now, this whole changing environment threatens them. They feel extremely threatened by all these developments. So in terms of these concepts that I'll talk about, you find that there is very little we can do about those. I've seen a lot of those. I've met some corporate leaders that you can see that.
Are you saying that the only hope is to replace them and to retire them?
Yeah, it's to retire them. And obviously with our bureaucratic systems, there's still a room for bureaucrats to play. But obviously what I'm propagating here is to have a pendulum swing towards more entrepreneurial type thinking. So this is where I'm really going to. And this is quite exciting because it's not just talking about individuals wanting to become entrepreneurs. If you look around the globe, we even have leaders and presidents and prime ministers who behave like entrepreneurs. They are able to take their country to 10x level. And if you see, for instance, President Kagame in Rwanda, I mean, he is extremely entrepreneurial. His future, he looks at the future and sees what he can do for Rwanda.
I was throwing another name, Magufuli in Tanzania.
Magufuli, in terms of the way he thinks as an entrepreneur. Maktoum of Abu Dhabi, Dubai. I mean, he's taking Dubai to a very different. Again, the way they think. They are taking
very
people.
Different from,
yes, they launched. They went to space, and these things that we talk about well-being. Martin Seligman has been to Dubai.
Yes.
Talking to the civil service about exciting thing about well-being. So they are very progressive, and they make decisions that are right. So this concept, I'll be looking at macro, also at micro level.
I think my original question was, how do we emancipate ourselves from this bureaucratic thinking that has been browbeaten into us since childhood, since primary school?
Look, it goes back to now these entrepreneurs, because they are the ones who will lead in breaking up this bureaucratic system. Now, let's talk about them being role models. Like I said, the old style bureaucratic leaders are falling off the train. And if you recall, during my young years as an engineer or as a manager at the mines, I remember I used to admire Jack Welch. Jack Welch was the chief executive of General Electric at the time.
GE,
I know he did a lot of restructuring. He was almost a rock star at the time, admired. In South Africa, we had, I don't know if you remember Coleman Andrews, who was leading South African Airways. Those were like rock stars at the time. Leah Cocker, they were all these leaders at the time.
Yeah,
but today, who do we talk about? We talk about Mark Zuckerberg, we talk about the Uber guys, Elon Musk. Exactly. So those are entrepreneurs. Those are 10, 100 times type thinking entrepreneurs. And that's what I'm saying. As a country, we've got to try and develop these skills. Now, promote those. Now, what are the attributes? Because I think the reader probably asking, what do I need to do? What are the attributes of this type of leaders? I think one is that they are role models because of the way they behave, the way they take in knowledge, the way they learn, the way they approach, for instance, when they problem solve, they are very comfortable in taking on challenges. Okay, so that's very important for that type of leader. But what's also important is that they are also in terms of their day-to-day activities, how they plan their activities, it's different from your normal entrepreneur of a bureaucrat. For instance, I mean, I like what you said earlier on. You say you go walking, you go jogging. Those are the type of things, because an entrepreneur needs energy, needs vitality. So you can't do those things unless you look after your temple, which is your body. So I'm always impressed when people do these type of things, because you cannot be an explosive energetic, because you have to create relationships. You got to, so that needs a lot of energy. So even the way they conduct themselves on day to day is different from ordinary people. So that's very important, because now the entrepreneurs are taking over from where the bureaucrats have left. The other important factor, which is highly important, is that the way they deal with the bureaucratic system, and this goes back to my history as well. As a, I mean, if I take you my days at Botswana, let me give you an example how bureaucratic it is in terms of structures and hierarchy. In the mine, you've got different levels of staff. You got the mine, you got laborers, you got semi-skilled, you got artisans, you got foremen, then you got engineers. We were the engineers who at the time there was quite a development of citizen engineers coming into middle and management levels. And then at the top, you got obviously senior top managers. We were also of different races. At the time, obviously, there's a lot of influence from Anglo because there was a shortage of skills. So you had a lot of managers who came from South Africa, from the apartheid South Africa, from there, which had a culture of South Africa. So in the mine, if you
a culture of white superiority.
Yeah, superiority. If you took that and put it in the structure of the township, also was just like it was structured. Let's give you an example. In the mine, in joining, you had the golf club, and then you had the Galaxy Club. They've got a football team now. And then we had a bar entertainment area called Kuwait. There was another one called Mankokodi. So I said, and when I visited these different clubs, it was all to do with the structures at the mine. The guys were the educated citizens who go to Galaxy. The senior guys in the mine, the general manager and his colleagues who go to the golf club. And then all these guys, the laborers and all that, will go to Mankokodi and Kuwait. So one time I said, I'm going to break this thing. So I went to Kuwait, where there were all the semi-skilled and Mogobe, they were so shocked. Because they've never seen a manager coming in. It was a culture shock to them to see a manager. So I'm just giving an example of the hierarchy. And even when I left and I went to talk to my subordinates, I had a group of foremen under my section. And I told them that I went there and why they have to break this habits of hierarchical behavior. And they were actually disappointed. They said, no.
Because your thinking was you wanted the ideas to cross-pollinate across levels.
I'm just giving a classical example of bureaucratic structures that lead to bureaucratic thinking, which obviously stops innovation, stops all those type of things. So the top 10x entrepreneurs learn how to ignore bureaucratic systems. That's very important. So
totally
I ignored
disregard them or to work with them.
No, you disregard them. You have to. Importantly, you learn how to bypass bureaucratic limitations. They thresh it. Even right now, as a consultant at InnoLead, we're trying to propose ideas and innovations to government. But you can see that the bureaucrats in government, they struggle with these ideas because they just blow their mind. I mean, we do strategy facilitation, we talk to managers, and you can see that when you take them out of their comfort bureaucratic environment, they struggle with this. So the problem with bureaucracy is that it doesn't create fertile ground for ideas
and for problem solving.
For problem solving, indeed. So these 10x entrepreneurs, they're able to ignore, they're able to even bypass. And the challenge in Botswana, as I said earlier, is that unfortunately we are a very bureaucratic country. In other words, the way there are administrative processes. We talk about red tape. We talk about
sometimes I call it bureaucratic sabotage or civil servant sabotage. Sometimes.
Yeah, but you can say it's sabotage, but that's how they are groomed. You see, that's how they're groomed, that's how they are schooled, that's what's made them successful. So that's the only thing they know. So with that attitude, you don't even criticize them. You can see that these poor people are struggling because the way their mental models operate. It's operate. I mean, I talked about education. It's also family. I mean, my parents were also from a bureaucratic thing. I mean, my mom, when I left Botswana, I decided, look, Mom, this is not the area. And even when I negotiated with Botswana, I said, look, this is not environment. I can't thrive in this environment. It's too limiting. Because I was challenging the Botswana business model to the general manager. He used to be shocked. I said, look, we can do more as an organization. I've done engineering, but why can't I play a part in the front line of the business in terms of marketing, negotiating a bigger deal with the
what
peers?
was your mom's response?
My mom was, she was very negative. She felt that, why are you letting them down? Why you are comfortable? It's that's the culture. And I had to obviously negotiate with my mom. But no. For me to thrive, that's not my type of environment. She's okay. Again, I didn't criticize my mother because she comes from a bureaucratic. She was also a senior person in government, and she came from that background.
Let's go back to the entrepreneur. Let's talk about stages of growth. Now let's go to the brass tacks. What are these various stages of growth, and at what point do you now start 10xing?
Yeah. Now we've defined and talked about the profile of a 10x entrepreneur in terms of a top entrepreneur, and we said also that should also assist those emerging and thinking about entering the entrepreneurial space. They should understand that to be a disruptor, a game changer, as typical, apply moonshot type strategies. That's the type of thought process and habits that I talked about earlier.
Yes.
Now, when you find that in life, people go through different stages of development. And this development is that you go through growth as an entrepreneur, you have an idea, you have a goal, and you reach your goal. And after you reach your goal, people have this assumption that other opportunities will just come. But unfortunately, the coming up with those goals, coming up with these new relationships brings a new complexity. Now that complexity means that you struggle to deal with. Now you have new relationships. There's technology that comes in, and you see that with different, just not entrepreneurs. You see that in the academic field. You see that with bureaucrats. You see it with a CEO of a corporate, where you can see that they've run the mile by because what has made them successful is no longer a formula to move forward.
Yes.
And it's also important to talk about, like I said, it's all applied at micro individual level. It's also applicable at country level.
Yes.
And this is where now our Botswana comes in, where I'm always discussing with authorities what the model that made Botswana what it was, what the Kama and our bureaucrats of the first 20 years of independence, they built control, they built governance. We were, glorified globally. They were good, a prudent way of managing finances.
They've set the foundation.
They set the foundation.
Now let's go to the rest of it.
And this is where we've reached that stage that is called, we've reached a ceiling of complexity. Retooling marulelo.
Yes.
So that is the stage that every entrepreneur needs to understand, that as you go through this, you go through those stages. I talked about myself. I was at Botswana. I reached a ceiling. I had to break out. I went to Geoflux. At Geoflux, we reached a ceiling, and I went to InnoLead. We came up with a 10-year plan. We actually grew by 10x. But in 2015, again, we reached the ceiling. That is when I joined this program, and this program taught me what actually reaching a ceiling. The main thing is to be conscious, and successful 10x entrepreneurs, they consciously plan their stages. In other words, this is my plan. I reach here. When I reach here, now I've got to retool my skills. The habits, the knowledge, the skills of now having to go to the next stage has to be different. And the other thing that's quite important is that now when you reach that goal, for you to prepare adequately for the next goals have to be bigger. They have to be energizing. They have to remember 10x is almost exponential. When you go 10x and you say the next day you want to grow 10x again, remember it's 10 times that 10 growth that you've had. So now it's exponential.
Yes. To where you started.
I was amazed with these 10x entrepreneurs that I come across with the coach program in Toronto, where Mogobe is quite amazing, because these are guys who some of them are multi-billion dollars type people. But when I sit with them, when we discuss, the level of energy. One of the guys that was in our group in a 10x program was a guy called Dr. Peter Diamandis.
Yes.
He wrote a book called The Bold. And this is the guy who's founded a whole university called Singularity University, which is again he said he looked at the whole business model of developing universities. Look, we need a new business model. This is totally different from the typical Harvard and all that. It's based in the state. I think it's in California. And he's and this is the guy who's got a space program. This is the guy who was telling us people are mining minerals in the world and the environmental issues. They are now looking to go to space to look for minerals in space.
On that point, I've read somewhere that these 10x entrepreneurs, one of the thing about them is that they read a lot. And I read something to the effect that they read 1 book a week. Some of them an average of 52 books a year.
Absolutely. No.
How important is that as part of this process?
An entrepreneur, I think going back to the profile of a 10x needs to be curious. Needs to be curious, needs to be a continuous learner, because things change
all the time.
We are in a professional space of consulting as InnoLead. You can imagine the changes that happen. Right now, we've got to learn to collaborate. When we do a proposal or we're thinking of a solution for a client, sometimes, just like last week, we were talking to a partner in Finland, and then we were talking to a partner in Latvia. So those relationships
you're thinking globally.
So exactly. So, but to get involved in an online with someone who struggles with English and you got to try and get a rapport, it's a different skill. A skill where we and I can be able to talk like this. So indeed, you got to be able to read, and like you said, you got to read an average of about 62 books a year, and this is an average for
52.
So even me, before I go to sleep, I almost read 30 minutes every day before I go to bed, because I just get excited. Like I said, you got to be curious.
I'm doing one biography a week currently.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. That is why you are doing amazing things that you are doing, like bringing us here.
Thank you.
Now, another thing that I need to emphasize, Mogobe, around reaching that ceiling of complexity is that once you've hit that ceiling, it is important to now bring a level of simplicity and clarity again to your life. Now, this is what this coach program did to me. When I went there, the tools and techniques and concepts they brought, they sort of opened up.
So what is the trick, apart from exercise, which you mentioned, probably a diet? What is the actual trick? I want you to put meat to the bone on that.
The trigger for 10x or to...
No, the trick in terms of the actual habits of a 10x entrepreneur.
Okay, let me give you...
You mentioned exercise and activity.
Yes.
And we mentioned reading.
Reading as
well.
I
want you to put more meat to the bone in that regard.
Yeah. I think the other one which is very important is that you have a very positive outlay to life. There are people that, for instance, with COVID, we spend half the time in the team looking for opportunities that come out of COVID. So you are almost hitting the challenge with a positive attitude. There are a lot of people that obviously went into depression. Some business suffered. We also suffered. Contracts were cancelled by clients and all that. But you got to say, how do we get going? And also when I talk about positivity, for the minimum that came through our books to maintain staff, we also took turns as a team every week to be thankful. Remember when you talk about positivity and well-being, you got to appreciate what's been. And this is another thing about 10x entrepreneurs, is that there's a certain level of calmness. These are guys that are doing big things. And when you discuss, they are inquiring, they are calm. They're not like those egocentric, status-driven corporates that are difficult to sit with. These guys that I met when I met in Canada, I never thought I'd be able to. But during tea break, when we sit, he's inquiring. He said, "Oh, you're from Botswana. Tell me about Botswana. Tell me about beef and that and that." I said, "These are just ordinary guys." So you got to be very, very. They meditate as well. A lot of them every morning they because you got to be have to be in a state of calm. You got to be able to this uncertain world that brings so many permutations every day. You got to be able to absorb it. And like I said, not only your physical self have to be right, but your mindset has to be wired right. So and then like I said, this all brings to when you reach a stage of complexity, you are able to retool yourself because you've been reading, you've been studying, you've created new collaborations. You got to look at your team members. For instance, when we reached our complexity in 2015 as InnoLead, we even really looked at the type of team members that we need to take on board to deal with the new complexity, the skills that we need to do that. So you got to also look at your organizational structures. You got to look at your business model to make sure that it's able to survive and take you to the next 10x program. So it's quite broad, the number of things that you look at. And importantly, it's also what really makes an entrepreneur tick at 10x is that they increasingly focus their activities on their unique abilities. For instance, at Coach Program, we studied and they helped us to unpack what we are passionate about superior skills. At InnoLead, there are areas that I'm competent, but I'm not superior. There are areas that I'm absolutely incompetent. So what happens is I have to increasingly, and we did an inventory. And based on that inventory, I dedicate time. Every time I went to, after 90 days, I went to Canada, I reported on how much more time I'm spending on because those are areas that give me energy. There is less anxiety because I enjoy it. I even do it over the weekend. I mean, there's an employee at InnoLead who's one of our top project controllers. This is the science of managing projects. And he every time he tells me that Mr. K is a call me in the office. I love project controls. Even on a Saturday when people are watching a football game, I can start looking at and researching and going to webinars on project controls. This is my thing. You know what I mean? And I go to bed happy. Actually doing things that you like, for some reason it energizes you.
So almost like your vacation and your vocation intertwined.
Yes, you have to make sure. So they did my assessment, and we did also assessment for our team at InnoLead to see what makes them tick. So increasingly, if the whole team, most of the team members focus on their unique abilities. Now what you do is, some of the stuff that you've been doing that's not your unique ability, you find a team member for which that activity is their unique ability. Then in other words, then they fly, this one flies, this one flies, and then 10x. That's how
you have to be prepared to delegate a lot of authority.
Delegation is the heart of 10x because you got to make sure that you focus on those unique abilities, because then when you focus on that, then you realize your best. Then you never retire. I mean, one of the things that I've learned through Coach is that if you are focusing on your passion, why do you then have to retire? So in the ways of a 10x entrepreneur, there's no such word as retirement. I mean, I've got old people at this program who are 70 years and they have 25-year plans.
So how do you then trigger the paradigm shift that is necessary? Is it education? Or are you saying that there's really no simple formula? It has to come from within. How do you turn on that light bulb so that you can become a 10x type of
I think there's a number of aspects. I think one is obviously comes from within. Like I said, in terms of the attributes of a continuous learner, in terms of the habits that you do on a daily basis, in terms of the collaborations that you reach with other people. And there are people that don't know how to collaborate at Mogobe, because you got to hook on all the other 10x. When you are a 10x entrepreneur, you got to hook on to other 10x's. You see now how it's easy for you to become 100x because the opportunities come from different facets of life, and there's an opportunity for you to become 100. So you got to be a collaborator. But there's also the macro environment. I mean, one of the things that really stifles entrepreneurship in Botswana is because the system in itself is bureaucratic. And that bureaucratic nature means that we only have a minimal number of people who are able to break through, because I mean, how many times do we talk about Botswana becoming, the private sector becoming the engine of growth and providing entrepreneurship?
We've said it. We've said it over many years, but it has intensified this year. I think I picked it in the budget speech. Dr. Matseka gave the budget speech. I think at the time we didn't know COVID was coming.
We
said there's going to be a conscious shift from public driven to private sector driven.
But as you know, this has been said for 30 years. It is the speeches of a lot of finance ministers talking about the private sector being the engine of growth and then having all the stifling. I mean, right now, government is doing a lot of things that it shouldn't be doing. You should be leaving them to you and I and other entrepreneurs who should be doing. But what I'm saying is that although remember I talked about that you have to learn how to bypass bureaucratic systems. Some of us, you and I and a couple of others, have managed to survive within this. But what I'm saying is if government loosens up If government becomes more innovative, some of the things that we propose to government, if they do them, they will, they will upgrade us, but will also be adding value to society with those innovative ideas, benefiting everybody else. So there are limitations at macro level, but it doesn't take you and I or an aspiring entrepreneur to carve their own path. Because right today, as InnoLead, we've opened office in Zambia, we've opened office in Rwanda, we are hooking up with an entrepreneur in Rwanda to work together again to be able to Uganda. So you got to, again, like I said, bypass bureaucratic setups. Because if you become negative, you become
so if there's
a
an
winner,
obstacle, you go through it or around it.
The 10x entrepreneurs know how to deal with obstacles.
Yes.
They know how to, and they derive and they learn and they collaborate and they learn how to deal. Well, another big example, which is very local, is who would have thought, and I know that you interviewed the gentleman late, who would have thought that in a few years Botswana could have one of the largest supermarket chains in Southern Africa? Who would have thought?
I had the privilege of interviewing Mr.
That requires 10x thinking. I know that based on the concept you're talking about, they hit a ceiling of complexity 2 years ago.
Yeah, they had challenges.
They hit because now the environment, the governance, the controls, because they're expanding to the region, there were now complexities that as a team, they struggled to deal with. Now they needed new strategies, new concepts.
They needed to consult InnoLead, yes.
Absolutely. So entrepreneurs, and I hope that's what Rema is looking at. You need to come to that. You don't get a crisis or you get blocked if you know that at that stage now, I got to look at new collaborations, new concepts, new habits. Even when you talk to Ram, you can see that he's even more motivated now, looking at the bigger things to do.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's the type of 10x. Even this past weekend, I was talking to one of the older generations of Botswana entrepreneurs. He used to be a former permanent secretary, and he's in his 70s. And I had a chat with him on Saturday. And it's amazing. His thought process. He's 70-something. He's going to new ventures and tourism. And I could see that he's excited. I was asking the question. I was like, these are the 10x. Yeah. He's already achieved. But he's still getting excited. He's got plans. He's collaborating with one of the ventures. He's not even doing it alone. He's hooked on another 10x entrepreneur.
Thankfully,
so that they're able
have
to
a lot of people like that.
So that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Or Moni here, Red Dada. You talk to them, they're very excited.
Imagine now if we have 10 times those type of people. And that's what I'm saying, that you got those, but Botswana has an opportunity to expand on those, because then we leave it too much to the hard knocks that are entrepreneurial, like you and I, who are able to survive on the side of the bureaucratic setup. But if the bureaucratic setup can shake up, can loosen up, so that we can really, what's interesting is that 2018, some ranking company in the States rated Botswana as one of the most profitable centers in the world.
In what
Do you
sense?
believe that? No, in terms of business profit. In terms of business. So we have an environment
How did they identify that?
Where they obviously do statistics in terms of performance of organizations. They look at the stock exchange. They look at profitability of organizations in Botswana, and they compare
It's
to the
good
UK.
to know.
Yeah. And we are here sitting on a diamond that we are not fully exploiting. And like I said, if we can have the type of thinking that the former Prime Minister of Singapore can have, if like Kagame has. Kagame is even launched. He's now going to a space program. He's got drones delivering health material to people in isolated. You are futuristic, and you don't wait. You break the bureaucracy.
Which leads me to my next question: creating a future-based self. Can you unpack that for us and define a future-based self, which is an important component of being a 10x entrepreneur?
Absolutely. Okay. Now, future-based self, and I'll talk more in our next session about breaking down future-based self in more detail. But broadly, everybody in terms of context of how they think about life, they are premised on what has made them successful in the past. This is their past self. And there is also how you'll see yourself in the future. As an entrepreneur, I'm sure you got a picture about 5-10 years.
Yes,
you are imagining Mogobe and the nuggets, how nuggets will be. Similarly, as InnoLead, I've got that picture, and it gives you that tinker of positivity and energy, and makes you almost run. So those are the future-based selves.
Yeah.
Now, as a person, there's also the present. Remember, I talked about the past-based self, the future-based self, and there's the present-based. Now, the present-based self is a combination of the past and the present, the past and the future, and it depends on which one is the most dominant. The most dominant. So that you got people that are in the present, but they're dominated by their past-based self. In other words, the past achievements, they always remind you what they've done. When you try to do something, no, but we've always done it this way. Those are the bureaucrats as well. Typically a bureaucrat is, because they ride on status, they are quickly reminded, I remember even when I was about to leave Botswana and I was saying Botswana can do this, some of the top bureaucrats, hey, this is Botswana, man. We've done things. This is a big car. They were quick to remind me about the success. And remember, success can be your curse. And one of the things as corporates in Botswana, as individuals, as a country, we got to know that sometimes your past can be your undoing. So you got to, this is when the future-based self comes. So you got to spend a lot of time thinking about the future.
Success can be your curse because it leads to what? To complacency?
No. Yeah, it leads to complacency, and because you take it too hard into you think the same success formula will lead you to the future. But the world is changing. The world is changing. There are new skills,
and new
habits, new ways of corporate governance, new ways of technology, and those require new skills. So that's how we use the word, you have to retool yourself. That's why the learning, the curiosity, having collaborations with, going to Canada every quarter. You can imagine that drew quite a lot in terms of funds from InnoLead. Some of our team members went for the coach programs in Chicago as well. And we believe that those type of expanding the way we think, it's more critical than having to invest in some short-term issues in the business. So that's the future-based self. The future-based self are those, and it's a critical component of a futuristic thinker. So, so that's what it is.
How do we then quantify the 10x aspect? In other words, how do you actually say, I'm achieving the 10x? In other words, do you notice when you're at 2x, 3x, and 4x?
Yes.
And if so, what systems are in place for you to actually track your growth?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll home it on the individual entrepreneur, the 10x entrepreneur that is part of our audience. Now, first, let's relate to InnoLead, where I said we grew 10 times. Now, as an entrepreneur, particularly, we talk about 3 freedoms that an entrepreneur needs to achieve.
You've got 4 on your fingers.
Oh, 4 freedoms? Yeah. The engineer can't count.
Okay.
So you've got 4 freedoms.
Yes.
First, you need freedom of money.
Yes.
Without money, very little gets done.
Yes.
You need freedom of purpose. Entrepreneurs have big things. When you talk to this guy, Dr. Diamandis, you can see he wants, this is the guy that uses, crowdfunding. He does trying to find solutions to society. That's what keeps him awake at night. He's got a sense of purpose. As InnoLead, we want to partner with organizations to sort out their implementation challenges. That's what excites us. That's what. So that's the sense of purpose. So you need freedom to pursue your purpose.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And then the other one is freedom of relationships. In other words, you should be free to hook on other relationships in the world. If you find people like top entrepreneurs, they don't have limitations in terms of who they can relate to in life. Okay. The last one, highly important, is the freedom of time. You need time.
That's the ultimate freedom.
That's the ultimate freedom. One of the beauties as an entrepreneur is that, for instance, right now, I am a new code, and I've told you before that I don't work on Thursdays. I could have told you.
I had to insist. You wanted us to do something on the Uber.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So one of the things that, as part of it, is that I've created Thursday as a free day, so that I can do other things that are important to myself, to be curious. So I do more reading, to go and do things that are important for my temple, for the system, in terms of exercises, closer to the family, spend more time to the family, which is very important for a 10x entrepreneur. So all those simple things, you've got to create time. So freedom of money, freedom of purpose, freedom of time, and freedom of relationships.
Yes.
Those are the 3-4 criticals that we want to achieve. So when you talk about 10x, you can measure those to see whether you are achieving those. So as Inoli, for instance, when I talk about we achieved 10 times, we measured the amount of revenue, whether you can multiply the revenue we achieved in 2005 by 10. So in other words, if we achieved 1 million, for argument's sake, $1 million in 2005, we achieved 10 million. So it's a very simple arithmetic and all that. Also, you can also personalize it because it depends on what you want, what your purpose in life. Because for instance, you can measure your 10x capabilities that you want. For instance, I measure the number of relationships I'm able to hook up in the world. As you can see with these networking with these guys in the United States, in Canada for this coach, I've got networks. When I hit, I say, oh, no. Hey, man, Joe, can you help me with this thing? We're in agriculture. I've got a so there's a 10x growth in relationships.
Oh, I see.
So you see what I mean?
So there's a system of computation
of 10x, yes. And it's not just money. There are other components that are important for the 10x to be able to measure to see whether you are growing from the next level to the next.
I don't know whether you've touched on this already, but the 2 entrepreneurial key decisions to be able to 10x, what are those 2? Okay,
that's a highly important. Now we've gone through the profile of an entrepreneur, of a 10x entrepreneur, in terms of what they look like, the habits and the skills that they need, which are different from ordinary entrepreneurs or from bureaucratic mindsets. And then we touched on reaching the stages of development and being able to maneuver through the ceiling of complexity, which is which is very important.
Plateau we touched on,
Then after that, you got to be able to shift and change from the old ways. You talk about the past-based self and the future-based self. So you have to be able to shift and look at the future and position where your organization is going. But it's almost a constitution, that one. The constitution is you got to look at 2 decisions that you have to make for you to become a true rounded entrepreneur. One decision is for you to be able to have economic security, you got to rely on your own abilities. They're with me. For you to be able to have economic security in life, you got to rely on your own abilities. Remember we talked about unique ability?
Yes,
what's unique about it? That's extremely liberating. The other one, which is highly important as well, is that for you to expect any opportunities in life, you got to first have added value to one or others in society. Yeah, with me. In other words, you got to add value to society. When I say as an engineer, as an entrepreneur in the professional service, for us to make difference, I mean, we do strategy. We have organizations that we've taken in terms of performance from here to there. That's what we want to do. And that's how I derive my economic security. That's what pays my bills and my colleagues at Inoli. So those are the two questions. Now, the important thing about these questions, particularly the first one, is that it takes you from depending on others. In other words, you now free yourself. Remember, all these are related. You free yourself from depending on bureaucracy. Because you are depending on your own abilities for your future or for your well-being. So that's what it does in terms of liberating you. The other one, in terms of now expecting value before you can get an opportunity, now it takes you away from the sense of entitlement. Wow. Now, entitlement in Botswana.
That is so sweet. What you just said there.
Oh, man. Sense of entitlement, saying, oh, my family owes me this, or government owes me this. So that's what I'm saying. When I owe me this and all that. And you see that in Botswana. And that is why one of the things that really damages entrepreneurship in Botswana is the culture of freebies. I mean, when you watch television, when you see now our political leadership at play, it's when they give a freebie. And for me, it's like you are now encouraging that sense of entitlement. You see it in very, very solid here in Botswana. So, but as a 10x, if you have an ambition of becoming a 10x, you've got to free yourself from entitlement. And you got to make sure that you do not depend on the bureaucratic system for your own future. And this is something that I tell to my kids. This is what I encourage everybody to do when you even you can see that it relates to the education system, it relates to the parenting, it requires, because when you are freeing people to now to follow their own. Remember when you talk about well-being, many months ago.
Yeah, we
said,
talked about the
yes. We
pursuit
talk
of
about
happiness.
when we talk about happiness, we talked about being able to do what you like, your passion being your vocation on it. So when you talk about now using that as your vacation, as your profession, as something that you derive value for people to pay you for, then you are free. It means you can walk anywhere in the world and add value, and you get to work. So that is really the premise of the two decisions that you have to make, because I'm sure you've seen it. You've seen senior people in government, you've seen entrepreneurs that all they hear is complaints. They're not giving me tenders, they are doing this, they are doing, it doesn't add value. It doesn't value.
Now, is there any kind of resource, as in a book or books or material, or even websites that you recommend for a young entrepreneur there who might be interested in really taking this further and actually consciously going through these steps?
Yeah, I think specifically I would obviously be biased towards my specific entrepreneurial coach, because again, as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs, the 10x entrepreneurs are very humble people. We have mentors. We have mentors.
Yes.
We have mentors. You have someone who's 70 years old and they tell you, I go and chat with so and so to mentor me.
Yes.
So in terms of ourselves as InnoLead, the program called Strategic Coach. So strategiccoach.com. If you go to it, a lot of these concepts that I'm talking about, there are some of them at Dan Sullivan.
InnoLead will walk you through it?
Well, if you want, but if you just want to be able to have these concepts articulated, like Dan Sullivan has got a lot of video. Dan Sullivan is the founder.
Sullivan,
Sullivan.
Yes.
If you Google him on YouTube, he's got a lot of videos on this concept. He's the one who's now trained over 60,000 or coached over 60,000 top entrepreneurs in North America, Canada, and the States. And this is the program that I attended. And there's a lot of material on their website. Obviously, you're going to pay if you want to go into the program. We had to pay, but they've got a lot of other free material to share with entrepreneurs globally. So I'll encourage our readers to go to strategiccoach.com and also Google Dan Sullivan videos on.
Am I to understand from this that you cannot be a 10x entrepreneur without a coach, without a mentor?
That's very, very, it's, like I said, they are very humble people. You are curious, you want to learn. So apart from reading, you also have a whole range of mentors in different areas of life. You might have a mentor, for instance, myself, I have very senior experienced professional consultants in South Africa that have done it for gazillions of years.
Yes.
When I hit a snag, I consult with them, I coach them, and they help me. I also give them feedback, which they also say, Lo and I know you are my mentor because I give them feedback on my experience. There's always room to learn. So you cannot be, even a CEO of a corporate, you cannot really become successful unless you are humble enough to say, I need assistance, I need a mentor. These guys, if I give you this guy, Dr. Diamandis, he's a super guy. And there he is, he's sitting with us, getting coached by Dan Sullivan. And I'm like, this guy is a multi-billion-dollar guy, but he's there. He's like, I'm taking that. I'm making this guy who flies in with a private jet to this thing. And he's also taking notes. And I'm looking at him and he's taking notes. I was like, that's the humble. That's really who these guys are. They are amenable. They are
looking at our landscape here in Botswana. And you gave examples of UAE, examples of Rwanda. Do you see, based on your consultancy work, that there's hope for us to get to that level, to produce those 10x entrepreneurs, and to even change the thinking in our leadership, political leadership?
Hey, that's tough. I'm tough because some of us have been at it. We've done a lot of consulting with government, with parastatals. Even with the private sector, there's still a lot of bureaucratic thinking in the private sector here in Botswana. Like I said, it's a thread that runs around our society, unfortunately. So, but in terms of hope, we always have to have hope, Mogobe, in terms of development. But it's something that you and I need to keep. We spend a lot of time with government officials in terms of shaking up this bureaucratic thing, in terms of developing. For instance, one of the things that I thought was an excellent idea is to sometimes take a permanent secretary, put him in a private sector organization, work with a private CEO for 6 months and see how decisions are made, so that you can enterprise our setup and just let that leader, even if it's not, I know in countries like Kenya, they, from their constitution, they can take private sector leaders to become ministers. Again, just to infuse a lot of, I don't know, in terms of Rwanda, he's trained, Kagame has trained his PSs to think in an enterprising manner. Decisions are made. I mean, here, decisions in Botswana, they still take ages. They take years.
Just to write a letter.
Just to write a letter and make a decision. And one of the things that is quite interesting is that you talk to a minister or a PS, and the next thing is no longer a PS, and he, or you talk to actually the permanent secretary, and he complains with you.
Even more than your complaint.
Yeah, and he says, but you are there to make the call. Why don't you
find
make the call?
Political leadership say, no, leave it to bureaucrats.
Yeah.
Those are the people that
make
call them
happen.
technocrats.
Yes, the technocrats. Yeah. So I think it's doable. Obviously, the political leadership needs to take this quite serious, because we are losing opportunities as a country. We need, as an example, there's a whole revolution around 4IR that's happening in terms of technology. I believe that we should have gone in, all out, spent money on 4IR in terms of, for instance, developing a 4IR center in Botswana. And all this is not happening, or if it's happening, we are not aware of it. These are things that will show us that indeed, and I've suggested to government, I've proposed that these are the things that we need to do to make sure that Botswana catches up with the 4IR revolution, and we can exploit it and it can make a better Botswana.
Optimistic, or
I think I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. These lawyers know the English as engineers. Well put. Cautiously optimistic, because they really need to do something.
We've come to the end of our time together. What I'd really like you to do, if you don't mind, Dr. Kgengwenyane, is to look at the camera and talk to the entrepreneur there. Say 1 or 2 words. One of them is I want you to promise that we'll come back and go deeper on the subject.
Yeah.
Okay? The second is to motivate and to energize that entrepreneur. Say something as a parting shot.
Sure.
A parting message.
Yeah. I think one thing with entrepreneurship is that it can be learned. There are a lot of people who are, particularly based on their background, who are able to develop and emerge based on circumstances. Myself as an entrepreneur, I surprised myself. This shaking off of bureaucracy and bypassing and ignoring it to develop an entity, it also surprised me. But the important thing is that during the journey, I managed to catch up with literature, with coaches that said, this is the roadmap for you to become an entrepreneur. There is a roadmap. So what I encourage is, as we said, go into the website, strategiccoach.com, find out how a 10x top entrepreneur can develop. You have a lot of those here in Botswana as well. And I also encourage the top ones that we have in Botswana, the Mogobes, the Rams, the Mulis, to make time for our young upcoming entrepreneurs, to coach them, guide them, so that we can have more Dangotes in Botswana who can go into Africa, go into the world, because the world is really up there for grabs. What limits us is in the mind.
Lastly, what services are available in your company, and how do people reach you?
Okay, at InnoLead, we are a management consulting firm. So our core competencies are around corporate strategy. We're able to look at organization, dissect it, look at the strengths and weaknesses, and be able to chart a strategy either for 3 years or 10 years to become future focused as an organization, excite management, bring in tools for them to be able to monitor performance, training where they need capacity to be able to deliver on the strategy. So corporate strategy is really our core competency. In addition to that is execution, which again has been a major weakness in our country, where you develop a beautiful strategy, you're not able to execute it. So what's the point of developing a strategy? So we assist our clients with the science, the art and science of implementing your initiatives, your projects in a very well-structured way, where you can be able to monitor and see where you're going and hopefully achieve your targets as an organization.
Contacts are?
In terms of leads, you can catch us at inolead@inolead.co.bw. But otherwise, we've got our website there. We've got our Facebook channel. We've got our other channel, Instagram, and all those modern social media platforms. We're available there. If anybody wants to reach us, please do so. We're very happy to assist where we can.
Yeah. By the way, you can. The levy, the training levy covers some of your...
Absolutely. Our training programs, project management, management development is covered by the levy. So absolutely, customers are free to come and join. And then obviously you get your money back through BQA. So absolutely we qualify for that, able to assist clients with getting their money back here.
Kgengwenyane, it's for me now to thank you, to recognize the impact you have. You have really set the stage for some of us. We've admired you for many years. And then we really appreciate what you're doing. Keep on doing the good work and keep that energy level going and maintain that great momentum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for honoring our invitation.
I appreciate it. No problem. It's my pleasure, sir. Cheers. Cheers, Mogobe. And cheers to your listeners, your viewers.